Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's so lovely to see so many people here. Before we get started, I want to start by introducing all of the coalition members who were a part of putting this together. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Raquel Ortega. I use they, them pronouns, and I am an organizer at the ACLU of Northern California. And I'll pass it to Adi.
Hello, everyone. Avi Olvera. I am organizer, activist, community resident in Concord, and I'm also a member of Concord Communities Alliance. And I'll pass it on to Mara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Burton. I'm also a member with Concord Communities Alliance and been working with these lovely folks for a while now. I'm excited to be here with all of you. And I will pass it to Kim.
Hi, everyone. Kimberly Galindo from Contra, Costa Immigrant Rights Alliance. I'm happy to be here, and I will pass it over to Ali Saidi.
Hi, everybody. Ali Saidi, also at the Contra Costa Immigrant Rights Alliance. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm really excited to learn more about this important work and hope that many of you will be interested in following up and joining our efforts to really stem the tide. And I will, do we have anybody else? I'll pass it to Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. Alifa Victory, she, her pronouns. I'm a staff attorney with ACLU's Criminal Justice Program. I'm a resident of Alameda County. Happy to be here with you all tonight, and I'll pass it to Ganita.
Hi all, I'm Ganita. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a criminal justice policy intern at ACLU of Northern California. And I think I'll pass it, not too sure to who, but maybe Raquel.
Yeah, I'll actually pass it to actually, yeah, we're all here. We did it. Sorry. Or is there anyone we missed? I think we're good. Cool. Great. So I want to start off with a question to you all. Why are civil rights important? Why should they be protected? Why should we care about privacy? Or yeah, why should we care about civil rights? Feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand, and if you want to come off mute, and you can speak to the group. I'll give folks some time to chat, to type. Is there anyone who's interested in coming off mute?
Sure, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so we're asking folks, why are civil rights important?
They're important because they people need to advocate for themselves. They need to stand for their rights. They need to stand up for social justice and equality. I'm writing an essay about disabled celebrities, and these people all advocate for themselves by standing up for their rights and social justice. So they need to stand up for themselves for inequality.
That's right. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, people need to know, these rights are there to protect us, right? And that includes being able to know what our rights are, in order to know when they're being violated, in order to know when we need to be standing up and exercising them. I see Laura also said, because they serve as the basis of our democratic government in equal representation. And I think that's exactly right. So today we're going to talk about surveillance technologies that are often used by police. We're going to talk about what surveillance means, why we believe it's harmful, and discuss ways that the community can get involved moving forward. So if that's you, we want to make sure that we hear from you directly. So I really hope you all came ready to share. But first, let's talk about what we mean when we say surveillance. What does it look like in the real world? What are some real examples of police using surveillance technology across the county and the country? So surveillance in the United States is out of control. We're seeing a rapid expansion of data collection, storage, tracking, and mining at unprecedented levels. Unless we fight back, this country is at risk of turning into a full-fledged surveillance society. Ever since 9/11, surveillance of the public has exploded under the guise of this war on terror, or the war on terrorism. The Department of Homeland Security has invested millions of dollars and in law enforcement initiatives, including in the Bay Area through federal grants. And the result has been local law enforcement being able to buy high-grade military surveillance equipment at no cost to them, but oftentimes high cost to taxpayers. What's worse is that much of the technology is acquired with no public input, no policies to regulate them, and no accountability. In a poll by the Pew Research Center, it was clear that most Americans feel powerless over surveillance. They have very little to no understanding about what is done with the data and are concerned about how it's being used. Does that sound like you? Want to know? No.
Hey, Raquel, I just want to say, if there's slides, are you able to share your screens? We can't see them.
Oh, it's not being shared?
No, we could just see you on Spotlight. There you
Thank
go.
you so much. For saying that. Let me see if I can go back. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate that. So here was a slide that I was just talking about with right now surveillance being out of control. It's oftentimes done in secret with little to no oversight. So how have things changed during the pandemic? You can see it now, right?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So during the COVID pandemic and Black Lives Matter uprising after the murder of George Floyd, we've seen tech companies exploit widespread fear in communities. Companies use the crisis to sell these face scanning coronavirus detection technology that can detect fevers, things like that, that experts say actually didn't work at all. We had to fight the CDC to make sure that immigrants who got the vaccine or who tested positive for COVID wouldn't have their personal information shared in databases and then used against them. We just went through another variant and surge, and our communities continue to struggle. And there are still so many unanswered questions. In the face of rising poverty and despair, we hope to see efforts to build out strong, sufficient interventions that meaningfully respond to these conditions. But instead, we're seeing a backlash. The Bay Area is no exception to the rising anxiety of crime, and we're now in danger of public officials backsliding into old harmful answers. Recently, San Francisco Mayor London Breed invoked the need for tough love and pledged to be more aggressive with law enforcement. More aggressive with law enforcement, more aggressive with changes in our policies. Parts of her new proposal include increasing the police budget, increasing patrols, and gutting the surveillance ordinance we worked to pass with community partners that would promote transparency and accountability. We're gonna post a link in the chat that goes into a little bit more details about that. But this narrative is something that's really pervasive, and it's something that's spreading all throughout our communities, including in Contra Costa. So how does surveillance work? Why is it harmful? I'll give you an example by talking about automated license plate readers, because these are in virtually every city in Contra Costa. So imagine being in a car, whether it's you driving or maybe you're driving with somebody else. You go to work around 8:30 a.m. You drive to have lunch with a friend around noon, then head back to work. Around 5 p.m., you drive to the grocery store before heading to a local protest around 7 p.m. Then you head home. Imagine local police departments having access to this information without reason or without a warrant. License plate readers throughout California indiscriminately scan and retain vehicle information as we travel throughout our day-to-day lives. Automated license plate readers, or ALPRs, will then send out alerts if they see a plate of a car presumed stolen or one that's been involved in an incident. But
Like kidnapping a child.
But unfortunately, they are wrong at least 1 in 10 times. And like almost everything else in our policing infrastructure, the technology is unequally applied to concentrate the greatest scrutiny in communities of color and lower income communities. So this is something that happened to Zach Norris, the executive director of Ella Baker Center, while he was returning from a hike with his family and a friend. Someone swapped out their license plate with Zach's license plate with one that was used to commit a crime. Zach was pulled over, surrounded by 7 cop cars at gunpoint and handcuffed. Thankfully, police took the time to check his registration and confirmed that the plates were stolen and eventually released him and his family. And although this could have ended much worse, the trauma still lingers for him. Police rely on technology that is imperfect and can often have disastrous and tragic consequences. It also does nothing to actually prevent crime, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. There are also immigration consequences, right? This very much plays into our systems of mass incarceration and mass deportation. Law enforcement uses extremely powerful surveillance tech to more efficiently watch, stalk, and control people of color and other marginalized groups. In 2019, we learned that ICE was using automated license plate readers and databases from local law enforcement agencies to target immigrants. So we had local law enforcement who was using this. They were partnering with a company called Vigilant Solutions, who makes and sells the databases and the cameras. So Vigilant is one of the companies that stores the information. So we've discovered that there were over 9,000 ICE officers who gained access to the Vigilant system under this $1 million contract. The Contra Costa Immigrant Rights Alliance, CIRA, has followed up with the Sheriff's Department to make sure that they aren't proactively sharing information with ICE. But this is something that can easily change at any time without notice. So here is a list of cities in Contra Costa who are currently using automated license plate readers from Vigilant. We got this information from a tool that was created by the Electronic Frontier Foundation called Atlas of Surveillance. And so there's a link to that here, atlasofsurveillance.org. I'll add that even if the sheriff's department, right, they've told us, that they're not proactively sharing information with ICE. In their contract, they say we do not allow you to share our information with ICE, but that's something that can also change at any time and we wouldn't know it. And so that's one other reason why this is just so important, to make sure that we're asking these questions and that we're monitoring. Here are other cities who are using automated license plate readers that are not vigilant solutions. So as you can see, it's being used pretty much everywhere. I want to take a minute to do a quick plug for a very important bill that folks are working on right now. The entanglement between law enforcement and ICE is very dangerous and unfair. If that's something you're really passionate about and you'd like to get involved with, you can do that by clicking on a bit.ly. We'll drop in the chat. The Contra Costa Immigrant Rights Alliance is supporting a very important bill called the Vision Act, which would help end some of these harmful and racist practices. And they're hosting a community forum in April. So I hope y'all can come to that. I'll be breaking down some more technology later, but the point being that these technologies give police unheard of reach in our personal lives and are largely being purchased and deployed in secret. Often these tools don't even address the problems we're trying to solve in our communities. And when police are poorly trained or the technology has not been clearly thought through, cities face lawsuits because they violate people's rights or harm them. So remember how I mentioned earlier that we had worked with partners to pass a surveillance ordinance in San Francisco? Well, San Francisco ended up violating it. So we're working with activists we're helping activists sue the city and hold them accountable. But if the ordinance didn't exist, it makes it a lot harder to do that. Okay, so before we go into some myth busting, I know I just said a lot of information. I'd love to take a minute to just go through some questions. To go through any questions that people might have. Feel free to type in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can have you come off mute. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions so far. Don't worry, we'll have more time for questions later. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Kimberly to do some myth busting.
Awesome, thank you, Raquel. Sorry, everyone. My face was really close to the screen because I am assigning everybody breakout rooms from your city that you are from. So excuse my face being so close. So Mythbusters. No, I'm not gonna have like a big old like bomb explode or some science stuff like the show Mythbusters, but we will talk about technology and why it is important to not have so much of it. So is fact, technology is not neutral. So yes, next slide. Fact, surveillance does not prevent any crime, even though we are in our brains, we think that it does, but it does not prevent any sort of crime whatsoever. Fact, everyone is treated as a suspect when it comes to surveillance. Fact, over-policing does not reduce any crime. fact, policing isn't the solution. We are the solution. So coming together as a community is really important. So even just hearing from you all is really important to us all. So yeah, we are the solution. And then are there any questions, comments, or any questions or comments? Alrighty, so no questions or no comments. So I will pass it over to Raquel, and she's going to explore what is going on in Antioch.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Great. So let's talk about Antioch. So these are the technologies that we know are being used right now. Facial recognition, automated license plate readers, which I mentioned, private camera registries, and drones. So what I'd really love to do a deeper dive with y'all about is facial recognition. I want to start just by asking, what do you know about face recognition? Have you heard of this before? What have you heard about it? You tell me, because this has been around for a minute now. It's still an emerging technology, true. I see also Gordon asking, is there data which supports the fact that surveillance does not prevent crime? It would be good to have arguments about this. That's a great question. And yes, I'll say that at this point, a lot of the surveys and research that's been done about it has been overseas. For example, in the UK, where surveillance CCTV has been around for much longer. And there are some different surveys and like research been done in the United States. I can make sure that we get that information, and I'll include a couple examples that I can send to you all after the presentation. It's not very good for people of color, right? Yes, I've heard the same thing. This facial recognition is not good at differentiating between darker or brown skinned people. That's right. And I'll say especially women, especially women of color. So that's right. Facial recognition has a proven track record of being inaccurate. This is a slide from a documentary called Coded Bias that illustrates this point when a Black MIT Media Lab researcher named Joy discovered that the computer visioning software that she was using only worked once she put this like white mask on like this. And with Joy, it didn't detect her at all. But then other times with other Black, Indigenous, and people of color, it detected like features and people incorrectly. So its deployment on our streets will lead to often has led to people, innocent people being arrested, injured, and it's only a matter of time before someone could get killed.
Wow.
So here's an example of something we're working with right now. Robert Williams, who is a Black man and a Michigan resident, was wrongfully arrested because of a false face recognition match. Detroit police handcuffed Robert in his front lawn in front of his wife and his two girls. Police locked him up overnight in a cramped and filthy cell. They took his fingerprints, they took a DNA sample and a mugshot. Then afterwards, they ended up acknowledging during an interrogation the next afternoon that, quote, the computer must have gotten it wrong, end quote. Robert was finally released nearly 30 hours after his arrest. ACLU is representing Robert to learn more about what led to his wrongful arrest and to bring to light the dangerous impacts of facial recognition technology. You can read more about his story on our blog. But this is something that is literally in your communities right now. In Antioch, this is what police is using. They're using Clearview AI. So Clearview is it's only getting bigger. And because policies are so far behind, there's very little regulating how it works. Deploying face recognition on our streets is an unacceptable mass violation of privacy. And because of companies like Clearview AI, nearly every one of us is in a facial recognition database. Because the way that they work is it scrapes social media. And so if you have a LinkedIn profile, if you're on Instagram, if you're on a website for your work, it scrapes websites and social media accounts and then puts you into a database. So like I said, nearly every one of us could be in a facial recognition database in Clearview, whether we've ever had any kind of interaction with law enforcement or not, whether we've consented to that or not, which we have not, but they're doing it anyway. So thankfully, we still have the power to stop these systems from being deployed in our communities. I see people typing in the chat. So before I pass it on to Adi to talk about Concord, I just want to take a quick look. Great. The biggest concern. Yeah, I like that people are starting to think about like, what can we do from here? What we can do, now from here. Okay, we'll come back to this. I'm gonna hand it over to Adi to talk about Concord.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here with all of you. Adi Olvera. I'm a resident in Concord and founding member of Concord Communities Alliance. And with Mara Burton, we are part of an action team that worries a lot about community safety, and especially for vulnerable populations in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, and any impacts that law enforcement or city council decisions that they make that impact those communities. And we started noticing last year that the police was looking at purchasing a drone and implementing a program. What we found in the process was that they had already initiated a pilot program and had borrowed drones from the county, who also does not have surveillance ordinance, like many other cities, on how to properly use with policy drones. And so with the support of Mara Burton, many other community members, ACLU and the Frontier Foundation, we were able to just kind of organize around looking at what was going on. We found out that the city was looking at accepting a $35,000 grant from Marathon Petroleum, which is a petroleum company that has a history across the nation fighting against Indigenous people that are trying to protect their land and from the harms from oil pipelines that are running through their properties. And so we were highly concerned about why were they accepting a grant from Marathon to fund their drone program. Like who is the drone going to protect here? And so without us learning from Frontier Foundation, ACLU Northern California, that we need a surveillance ordinance, we started to demand that, because we don't want over policing of BIPOC communities. We don't want invasive and technology that violates our privacy, and we don't want it used against protesters. So in the next slide, you'll see an image where, if you can switch slides, please. You'll see an image where that was, I think, a year and a half, or yeah, to 2020. There was a peaceful protest for Black Lives Matter after the killing of George Floyd. And we didn't know at that time that police were already using that pilot drone to spy on protesters. They use it under the language that they were just making sure everyone would be safe. But we don't know what type of drone they used, if they had facial recognition, if it had, there's a lot of unanswered questions about why they would use harmful technology during a protest where people are even afraid to come out to speak up about law enforcement and law enforcement's harmful techniques and brutality, police brutality on civilians. And here was police using a drone on that type of protest, which was just unacceptable. And so we called that out, and many city council members said, well, we didn't know there was a drone being used on protesters. And so, that's the kind of stuff and the reasons why we want to create a surveillance ordinance policy so that Contra Costa wide, so that we dictate as a community how we want law enforcement to use these technologies. If we could delay and not use these technologies that are harmful to our communities, the better. But if they're going to implement them without our consent, then we want some kind of protection that will prevent law enforcement from abusing their power against our communities. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, they got their grant of $35,000, and that was before the holidays. And around 6 months from then, they said they would look at modifying a policy that they would use that was actually very not well drafted when we looked at it initially. And they would come back to council with the revised policy and promote a police officer to monitor this policy, but it was not a surveillance ordinance. And so we have to continue as a community to fight for better policy and surveillance ordinance, as well as ensure that they're reporting back to the community at times that they're using technology like license plate readers, drones, and other cameras that are collecting data on us, as well as when are they using data from Ring cameras and other cameras that they could solicit information from us. So instead of investing this money in the community into drones, we would have liked that they would have invested this in youth programs or something to support the community in different healthy ways. So we want to demand more transparency. Oh, sorry, what slide are we on? This one? Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to be fighting for ongoing oversight and accountability. That's something that we want to do here in Concord, as well as more thorough use policies. And we're going to be calling upon the community and all of you who are here today, if you sign up with the group to learn more after this, that, please come and ensure that they're using good policy. And that we're weighing the costs, because what happens is that the city could have major lawsuits filed against them, which cost the taxpayer money. And so programs like this could actually cost us more. And not only cost, drone may have cost $35,000, but they're not looking at the cost of managing the data, and then the harm on top of that could be released to federal agencies like Homeland Security. So, you know, law enforcement says they promise not to spy on Concord residents for no reason. But I don't believe this is going to be entirely true because they're already resisting to the use of strong policy or surveillance ordinance. Slide, please. And so, you know, we want to form an alliance with other cities that are already using drones or other types of technologies like us. So I'm going to pass this slide back to Raquel. Thank you.
Awesome. So now that we've given you all of this information, telling you a little bit about the state of surveillance within the United States, and then doing a couple deeper dives in Concord and Antioch, we want to talk with you. We want to hear from you about where we go from here. Some of the things that came up around potential solutions that have been used in other areas are having a city ordinance, but we've also been curious about exploring the possibility of a county-wide ordinance, right? Calling for transparency and accountability, have required standards throughout the county. That's something that would be really new and bold. There's also the ability to pass surveillance bans on certain technology. So for example, if we think if you all think facial recognition shouldn't be involved in the county at all, let's ban it. If we want to get rid of automated license plate readers, let's ban it. And then also call for alternatives to surveillance that focus on addressing root causes. Yeah, these are all potential things, but what we're interested in knowing is what you want to do and what you care about. So we're going to go into breakout groups now. And we're going to ask, we just want to hear from you. What do you think about this presentation? What do you think about some of the things that came up? Have you ever experienced or heard of something happening when it comes to surveillance? What problems are we trying to address? What do you think about the state of surveillance? What are the alternatives what are the solutions that you're very excited about? Where do we go from here? So we're gonna stay in the breakout groups until 8:20, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about, thanks for joining. We'll talk about some of the things that came up for folks, and then we'll talk about how you can get involved in next steps. So we're gonna have, I forgot to ask, I forgot to say too, for folks who are using interpretation, if you could either raise your hand or rename yourself to, add a star in your name, then we can make sure you get put in the Spanish speaking breakout group. Kelly, is that by police? I'm very curious. We can definitely talk about that more offline too. But yeah, let's go ahead and launch the breakout groups. Awesome. We'll make sure that everybody gets access to a survey that we're going to send out later on how you can get involved.
I opened up the breakout room, so I don't know if folks are in them already. You have to press join on your screen. Or is this breakout room number 1? This is breakout room number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Raquel, you can join a breakout room or we can stay in this room.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna stop recording. Let's see. All right. Okay, so it looks like we had some people drop out. But I've so appreciated the group that I was in, folks feeling very passionate about just very, yeah, just very important issues, right? Like this is definitely something that is complicated, right? And I just so very much appreciate everybody who was able to share different perspectives. What is most important is figuring out solutions. Oh, okay, there we go. Initially, yay, great. Thanks. Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, I so appreciate the discussion and the passion everyone had. It is a complicated issue, and what's most important is trying to figure out how do we move forward together in a way that represents what you want, right? How do we make sure that the policies and regulations in place are lifting up your voices and what you're wanting and needing? So are there, oh, sorry, thank you. Let me put this in. Thank you. You see the slide, right? Not my notes. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Does anybody want to share a little bit about what came up in their group? Let's start with group 1. I think that was Adi's group.
Mara, do you want to share since you were facilitating?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about kind of some of the things that folks have experienced in our communities regarding surveillance and kind of how folks have been affected by it, just to kind of kick us off. And then we spent some time talking about kind of where we're at and what would be helpful going forward. And one interesting thing that came out of that discussion was potentially creating like a toolkit that would be available to the community to help them have some talking points and some guidance so that they can go and speak to city council members or board of supervisors and kind of empower the community to speak out and talk to other people about what is going on with surveillance. So I thought that that was a really neat idea and something to think about going forward.
Yeah.
Adi, is there anything else that stood out to you that you want to bring back to the group?
I think it was really good to hear from people who have huge concerns about technology and in license plate readers, and that there was an incident where an individual was mistaken by another robber just because this plate reader matched their name. It's a minor description, bill as a Latino. So this is, concerning for residents in Contra County when plate readers don't work well.
Can I just interrupt right there? I would just argue that in that particular situation, somebody was, it was really unfortunate that their license plate got stolen and there was a case of mistaken identity, but it was able to be worked out. And ultimately, that license plate was the target, right? So the technology succeeded in finding the target. So I fail to see how that's an argument against the technology. Yes, the police did their due diligence and showed that he wasn't the one who should have been arrested, and maybe that should have been a better process, and we should definitely be addressing that in the future. But ultimately, the license plate reader did its job.
Mhm.
Oh. Well,
Is the
Tim, I don't think you.
conversation not bigger than like a camcorder is a camcorder, it's going to record. And it makes sense, as you were saying, Tim, that depending on, what the city or community.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up super bad. Are you still there? Portia?
Yeah, I think maybe Portia got dropped, but yeah, I mean, I'll just say, sure. I think the ALPRs, right? Like they have a very specific purpose, but I think it does matter how people are actually impacted, right? Like, should we be striving for using technology that works the way to like work accurately, or do we want
Oh,
to,
yes.
or yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe the minimum. And like, how is it actually impacting people directly? And that does matter. I think
Right.
I know that impacted Zach and his
Yes.
family, and so those are the types of things that I think people should be making decisions about, whether
And
they
I
want
think that
communities or
sorry,
not.
I thought you were done. I think to address that directly, we should be having the discussions of how situations like this are handled. Like, what is the procedure? License plates identified. Who identifies it? Who identifies who that car belongs to? What's the procedure for engaging the vehicle, the person who owns it, whatever? And then what is the accountability that we hold these officers to? So I think it's just counterintuitive to cut it all off because things might go wrong. Like, let's try and figure out how to make it right instead of just say, I don't want it.
Sure. So I will say, I don't think that anybody right now is saying we should get rid of all surveillance. Like, what the thing that I'm hearing come up most in the chat and things that I heard in the chat, I mean, in the breakout group is, yeah, like, how do we make sure that that people's voices are being heard? How do we make sure that community input is given before something is bought? How do we make sure there's transparency, right? Like, going back to, for example, the surveillance oversight boards that have been passed in other areas, doing this cost benefit analysis, not just around finances, but the actual civil rights impacts. And then like you said, I really appreciate what you said around accountability. Can there be a log indicating, the success rate, right? How many times was this used? What was the outcome of that? And if it does get abused, what happens, right? Those are all things that should be just standard practice, and right now it's not. So is there anything else? Thank you so much, Tim. Is there anything else that folks want to add real quick before we wrap up that came out of your group?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that from our group, that group. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I did want to respond to just say that I think that the accountability is key, but I also want to know the dollars. I want to know how much we're spending on this stuff before we do it too.
totally.
That's the other thing I wanted to say.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Great. So what happens next? So Kimberly already posted in the chat. We'd love to have everybody stay involved. You know, we just listed a survey that will allow you to let us know how you would like to be involved in the future. You know, to please, although actually now that I'm looking at this, I may have actually posted the wrong. Do you all have access to the? Okay, yeah, you let me know if the survey is not working, but I think that I think it's the right one. Please also, we weren't able to do a deep dive in all of the different cities. I encourage you to use Atlas of Surveillance and do some more work in figuring out the technology that's been used in your area. And then, you know, we hope to follow up with you on how to do something, whether it's within your city, within your county, but how do we make sure, again, we have these like basic standard practices and that your voices and your concerns are being addressed. And also, please, yeah, if you're concerned about entanglement between law enforcement and ICE with immigrant communities, participate in the Contra Costa Immigrant Right Alliance Community Forum on the Vision Act. And let's see, you have to get educated on data and security. Yeah, so there's a lot of information. There was a lot of links. I'm gonna make sure that everybody gets access to all of that in an email after this. It's gonna take us, it usually takes us a few days to upload the recording. So I hope to be able to get you the recording by Monday. But otherwise, you know, thank you so much for joining. I so appreciate you all being here, and I look forward to working with you and talking to you again in the future. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Rachel, thanks for putting this together.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.